You're muted.
I am.
And I
Check.
was and I was saying such good things too. Welcome everybody. I'm Janet B. from North Carolina. I've recovered from compulsive eating and bulimia. And today I want to talk about like pitfalls in recovery, the things that lead to relapse. But before I do, I just want to tell a real short couple minutes about me, and even more important, about how God launched his search and rescue mission for me. And for the person who suffered through my talk last night, I'm sorry if you hear a little repeat. So I first came into OA when I was in high school, already a full-blown compulsive eater. I stole food, I stole money for food, and at my worst, I was binging and making myself throw up 6 times a day. And I actually had to have my esophagus surgically retightened because of the abuse I heaped on it. And I was a compulsive liar and made up crazy stories like cutting myself with a razor, pretending I was mugged, raped, going to a hospital for a fake rape exam, walking the streets of New York City at 2 a.m. with my rent money because I had to get food. And I continued this way even through my first 6.5 years in Overeaters Anonymous. Just going to meetings did not change me one single bit. In fact, I continued getting worse until after 6.5 years, I was introduced to the 12 steps and to the God who I personally believe launches search and rescue missions for addicts. So for me, it happened at an OA convention where I was there eating compulsively. I went to a workshop where a woman who was about my age, I was in my 20s at the time, she was speaking calmly and confidently and held up a big book and said how she hadn't binged in a year. A year. I had been in OA almost 7 years. And during that time, I never got more than 2 weeks of abstinence. And a lot of days I couldn't even make it to work without binging. My bulimia had progressed from twice a week to 6 times a day. I was in awe of this woman, but I was too scared to approach her because like I thought she might be an angel, and you don't walk up to an angel. So I turned to the stranger sitting next to me who I had seen her with, and I shared my amazement, and she said, "Come on, I'll introduce you. She's my sister." And she introduced me to this angel woman who introduced me to the big book and told me to read it. And that night I went up to my hotel room and I read those first 164 pages. And the next day, she asked me if I was willing to do whatever it took. I said, no, there's this one amendment I'm not willing to make. And she just said, can you trust that by the time you're at the 9th step, you'll be a different person? So I said, okay. So shortly after the convention, I boarded a train from Grand Central Station to meet up with her an hour and a half away and learn about how to apply the principles in this book that have saved my life and so many others, to learn about God and how to have a relationship with him, a proper relationship with him. I'd always believed in him. So my relationship with him was I was in charge and he was to be my cosmic servant doing my beck and call. That wasn't a proper relationship. The proper relationship is one where I surrender and I do his will. And once I surrendered my life to God and committed to work this 12-step program, it was like, honestly, it was just like a hand reached into my soul and yanked out the obsession. And by his grace, I've been in recovery over 40 years now. And in that time, I've learned something about relapse, what can cause it, what to do to get out of it. I went through the big book looking for what it says about relapse, what causes it, how to get out of it. So let's dive in. So there's a common misconception that relapse is part of recovery. It is not, right? It's not supposed to be. And actually, sometimes what we call relapse is just ongoing non-recovery, right? That was me for 6.5 years. I wasn't in relapse. I was just in non-recovery. Relapse is someone making progress in the steps, then going back into the food. And the big book says on page 120, it is infinitely better that a person have no relapse at all, as has been true with many of our men. Guys, that is amazing. They are saying it is possible to never binge again. That's been true with like a lot of them and a lot of us. The only solution to compulsive eating that this big book talks about is being protected by God, right? Page 85, it says, we feel we have been placed. We didn't place ourselves, God placed us. We feel we have been placed in a position of neutrality, safe and protected. So really for a compulsive eater, relapse is the state of being outside of God's protection. So what leads us into relapse? So again, I'm going to tell you the page numbers in the book, and actually my notes are on our website. So if you look under other resources, you'll find these notes if you want to look at them later. So first pitfall, not moving ahead quickly in the steps. If you're ever in a big book trivia game and they ask you the only step you're allowed to postpone, it is step 5. And that is only if there's not a suitable person around to hear it. We cannot take our time in the steps. Number 2, lack of humility, right? We read the chapter, We Agnostics, and we read about the minister's son, and it says he couldn't move ahead so long as he thought he had all the answers. But as soon as he conceded, maybe other people were right, maybe there is a God, he had a spiritual experience. And y'all, a spiritual experience is basically God coming in and doing a renovation job on our hearts, making our priorities different so that like selfish, self-centered me became somewhat less self-centered, somewhat less selfish. I started to care about other people and not myself. Only God could do that because without him, I am a slug. Number 3, the big pitfall, dishonesty. This program says on page 58, this program requires that we develop a manner of living built on rigorous honesty. That means no lies. We can't lie. We can't lie at work. We can't lie to our sponsors. We can't lie to our fellows. And we can't cheat. No cheating on husbands, no cheating on taxes, no lying, no stealing. Page 73, it says dishonesty creates fear and tension, and that leads to more drinking, or for us, more binging. We can't lie to avoid consequences. On page 146 in To Employers, it talks about a man who gets drunk. And it says to the employer, your man may be trusted. When his wife next calls saying he is sick, you might jump to the conclusion he is drunk. If he is and is still trying to recover, he will tell you about it, even if it means the loss of his job, for he knows he must be honest if he would live at all. Usually, why do we lie? It's either to get something we want or to avoid consequences that we don't want. But if we're trusting God, we don't have to manipulate other people to get what we want. And if I've done something wrong and I need to face the consequences, that's part of being a mature, spiritually healthy human being. And I'll talk more about dishonesty to sponsors when I talk about idolatry. So number 4, fourth pitfall, not enough work and self-sacrifice for others. On bottom of page 14. In Bill's story, it tells us how we're supposed to perfect and enlarge our spiritual life. Now, I would have thought it would say, we perfect and enlarge our spiritual life through much prayer and meditation, but it doesn't say that. It says for people like us, yes, we pray and meditate. I spend at least 45 minutes just about every morning in prayer and meditation. But the way we perfect and enlarge our spiritual life is by work and self-sacrifice for others. Self-sacrifice, by definition, requires that we give something up for the welfare of another person. How much self-sacrifice? Well, on page 97, it says, we give up sleep. We have our fun time and our work time interrupted. It may cost us money. It may involve going on hospital visits, sometimes having people stay at our house for a while. I mean, there it says, a drunk may smash your furniture or burn a mattress in your home. You may have to fight with him if he's violent. It may involve calling police or doctors. I don't think Most of us have to go through things like this, but basically, our lives shouldn't be as easy breezy as they'd be if we weren't working this program. If I get to watch as much Netflix as I want, I'm not working this program hard enough. It should cost. And by the way, sitting in my house, just making phone calls generally is not self-sacrifice, right? If we're sponsoring and we're helping people, yes. But if someone's new and they say, oh, I did self-sacrifice, I called 3 people today. No, no. Go to Target and fold clothes. I had a sponsee who did that. She couldn't think of anything to do. She went to Target and folded clothes for 15 minutes. I had another who said she would go, when she went to the gym, she would wipe down rows of equipment. I mean, we want to do things that are self-sacrifice. Number 5, not working hard enough or fast enough on our 4th steps on page 63. Yes, we have to work hard on all our steps, but the big book is particularly pushes us when it comes to step 4. Why? Well, step 1, 2, 3, those are kind of belief things I do in my heart. But when I finish that 4th step, I've got a document that I can say to myself, and to the illness and to God, I've really done this. I'm really in. I'm in with both feet. The big book tells us we need to be launched on a course of vigorous action. It promises us that our 3rd step will have no permanent effect. Guys, recovery can be permanent. It says it right there on page 64, but it can only have a permanent effect if at once, as soon as we take our 3rd step, we put forth a strenuous effort on our 4th step. Strenuous effort. I have a sponsee now who's finishing up her 4th step, and I'm like, well, how are you doing? She goes, like, this doesn't feel good. I'm just seeing all this stuff about myself. Yeah, it's generally, most people think it is not fun. Although for me, I have to confess, it was great fun because I got to write for hours and hours about my favorite topic, myself. But truthfully, seeing all our defects and how we've hurt people, not the most pleasant thing, but we have to do it. Basically, if we're not at work or taking care of our family obligations, we should be working on that 4th step. Number 6, not resolving resentments. This is on page 66. The big book is very specific in mentioning this as a pitfall. It says, when harboring resentments, we shut ourselves off from the sunlight of the spirit. The insanity of drink, or for us, food, returns, and we binge again. And with us, to binge is to die. So remember, the only solution is to be protected by God. Harboring a resentment, like, right, you think of a harbor, that's a place where a ship can go and dock peacefully. We don't want to be a safe harbor for resentments, because then we shut the door on God, like a steel trap door coming between us and God. Okay, we're human. We all get resentments, but the goal is to not harbor them, to resolve them as quickly as possible. Number 7 is from page 68, not seeking to play the role that God assigns. If I'm not looking to play the role that God assigns and trusting him with the results, I cannot expect to have serenity in my life. Let me find the page. It's in How It Works on page 68. It has the formula for serenity. So it's telling me that no matter how much calamity is going on, I can have serenity. And it tells us, we are in the world to play the role that he, God, assigns, just to the extent that we do as we think he would have us. That's what playing the role God assigns is. There's 2 parts. I do as I think he would have me, and humbly rely on him. If I do, then I'm going to have serenity no matter what's going on. So if I'm all agitated, I really need to ask myself 2 questions. Am I not doing what I think God would have me? And am I not trusting him? And that's what I have to work on, not necessarily reducing the calamity, but increasing my own surrender and obedience and trust. Remember, if I'm not seeking to play the role that God assigns, then guess who's playing God? Me. And I'm essentially telling God to get lost. And God, being the perfect gentleman, if I tell him to get lost, he will grant my request and let me manage my own life. And the result of that is train wreck. So we don't want to play God. Number 8, not living up to our sex ideal or harming others. So on page 70, the big book is quite clear that if we fall down on our sex ideal and harm others, it says we are quite sure to drink. I don't think this is limited to a sex ideal because the main point is the harm to others. So I feel comfortable in saying the pitfall here is that if I don't care if my actions harm others, then I'm going to drink again. What if I do harm others? What am I supposed to do? Page 70 really gives me the antidote. If we are sorry for what we have done and have the honest desire to let God take us to better things, right? I can't take myself to a better place. I have to let God change my heart. If we're sorry and have the honest desire to let God take us to better things, we believe we will be forgiven and will have learned our lesson. If we are not sorry and our conduct continues to harm others, we are quite sure to drink. Okay. Number 9, not disclosing everything in our 5th step, keeping secrets. This is page 72. Why do we even do a 5th step? It says if we skip this vital step, we may not overcome drinking. And the big book clarifies this. It says the reason some people get drunk is that they never told someone their entire life story. They therefore did not learn the humility, the fearlessness, and the honesty that's required. Okay, so we have to we can't keep secrets. Number 10, not paying money we owe, page 78. It says we must lose our fear of creditors no matter how far we have to go, for we are liable to drink if we're afraid to face them. So here's something that I think probably happens a lot. Someone gets to the 9th step, doesn't eat compulsively, doesn't make a couple of the amends, and then binges. And so then what usually happens? They start over with a new sponsor at step 1. They do beautifully till they get to step 9, and then they binge, and then they start over, rinse, repeat over and over. And the person doesn't get it. And each time, it's like they're told you need, well, maybe you need a new voice. So here's what I would say. First, there's nothing wrong with my voice if I'm sponsoring someone out of the big book. And if someone comes to me, and I see one of my sponsees here nodding her head and says, I picked up, and so I generally say, okay, where were you in the steps? Oh, I went through. Did you make all your amends? No, there were a couple I didn't make. I will say before we do anything else, you need to go make those amends. Okay. People need to, if someone is falling down on their sex ideal, right? Let's say cheating on their husband, and that's not their sex ideal. The worst thing to do is to tell them to start over at step 1. Tell them, stop cheating on your husband. Stop breaking your sex ideal. Go pay your amends, right? So we want to do that. So again, not paying money we owe. If we don't have it, we make the amend and we make terms. We say, I can give you $20 a week until the $2,000 is paid off, or whatever it is. But we go and we make the amend and we make terms. Number 11, page 85, letting up on our spiritual program of action and resting on our laurels. It says we are headed for trouble if we do this. Every day is a day when we must carry the vision of God's will into all of our activities. So this pitfall applies to people who finish the first 9 steps and try to coast. And the big book is clear. We need to keep doing steps 10, 11, and 12. In step 10, we clear away the wreckage of the day so that we can hear from God in step 11. Isn't that crazy? Step 11, I was just talking about this. Sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God. Conscious contact, like contact. We're aware of it, a relationship. praying only for knowledge of his will for us and the power to carry it out. God has a will for me. God has a will for us. He has a plan. He has a purpose. We don't have to run around this world saying, what's my purpose? He has a plan. And we pray and meditate for knowledge of his will for us and the power to carry it out. He will give us the power to do whatever he needs us to. And, I have a friend in program. She actually hears God's voice. I do not hear God's voice. I will get a line out of the big book, a line out of the Bible, sometimes a line from a song, or just a thought in my head that wasn't there before. And it's like, that's the answer. We get that, like we get communication from God. But if we don't, if we're in a situation and we're not sure what to do, one question we can always ask ourselves is, what does love look like in this situation? And sometimes it's hard, right? If we're raising kids, it's hard. So that's why, thank God, we have this fellowship and people who've gone before us who we can ask for help. Number 12, not working intensively with other compulsive eaters, page 89. It says working with others gives us immunity, like a vaccine. I've heard so many people, they get through the steps, they may do a 10 step, they may pray and meditate, and they don't want to sponsor. And I say, and then if they pick up, it's like, you have to sponsor. We have no choice. First, it gets us out of our unselfishness. And I could read the big book, over and over. And, by the second, third reading, it's like, okay. But when I'm working with someone and making it come alive for them, it's telling it to me in a way that's alive for me. That's what keeps it alive in us. That's what keeps us grounded in unselfishness, grounded in God, grounded in these spiritual principles. And as the book says, like, it's a great joy. It's frequent contact with newcomers and each other is a bright spot in our lives. So we have to sponsor once we're through the steps, not before we're through the steps. Then we'll just be the blind leading the blind, and everyone will fall into a pit. Number 13, not immediately repairing damage we cause when we're inconsiderate or unhelpful, page 99. It says, of course, we're not always going to live up to the standard of being considerate and helpful. But the big book says, even though we all fall much below the standard many times, we must try to repair the damage immediately, lest we pay the penalty by a spree. So again, we make our amends in the 9th step, yes. But as we go through life, we make our amends when we cause harm. Number 14, imposing on people and lack of gratitude. Page 149, it says, the right kind of man, the kind who recovers, will not want to be made a favorite. He will not impose, far from it. He will work like the devil and thank you to his dying day. So we don't have to look to be, our sponsor's favorite, our boss favorite. I mean, I want to be my husband's favorite, but I think that's okay. And it says we don't impose. We don't ask people to do things for us that we're quite capable of doing for ourselves. It says we work like the devil. I'm assuming they're implying that the devil works like really hard. So it says we work hard and we're grateful. We're grateful to our sponsors. Every single time I talk to my sponsor, at the end of the conversation, I thank her. We thank people. We're grateful, and we have an attitude of thankfulness with God. And don't just write on the app, gratitude, gratitude, gratitude. Yes, do that. But then when we're done, we sit there and say, thank you, God, for this. Thank you for that. Thank you, that I'm healthy. Thank you that my husband had COVID and got better in just a few days. Thank you that my kids were here for the holidays and everyone got along. Like, we thank God, because this isn't about doing a gratitude list. This is about having a relationship with our loving creator who just showers us with so many blessings. I always say, like, removing the food obsession is just his opening act. Number 15, not knowing our personal temptations and limits. page 101. It's important to know where we can't go, either because, we're early in recovery or we're just spiritually shaky that day. In this case, right, if we're in recovery, we work with another compulsive eater, or if we're new, we find a way to stay away from temptation and be useful and practice self-sacrifice instead of going to a place of temptation. Big temptations come while traveling, and a large percentage of relapses happen when people go on vacation. If you're going on a vacation, really work with your sponsor to come up with a plan. Number 16, not resigning from the debating society, page 103. We don't have to be right about everything, really anything. Politics, religion, other people's food plans, other people's values. Isn't that what most of our resentments are anyway, right? People don't act the way we want them to. People don't have the values that we want them to. Who cares, right? The big book tells us we have stopped fighting anybody or anything. We have to. And then number 17, not actually mentioned specifically in the big book, but I believe it's implied throughout, idolatry. The definition is putting a person, place, or thing ahead of God. On page 55 of the big book, it says, we can block the fundamental idea of God that's in everyone by calamity, pomp, and worship of other things. And those other things are our idols. What's more important to me than God? Now, sometimes people aren't honest with their sponsor because they're afraid of being dropped. That's making an idol out of a sponsor. It is better to be honest and have no sponsor than to have the world's best sponsor and be dishonest with that person. Because a sponsor can't give us power, right? And that's our problem, lack of power. Being overly dependent on how our children are doing, on getting married, on our career, they can be our idols. And we can identify our idols if we fill in this blank. I won't be happy unless ... That's how often we can identify our idols. Idolatry blocks us from God because it puts that person, place, or thing on the throne. The solution is just surrender it, to say, God, I'm surrendering this and I will do your will above all else. So those are 17 pitfalls that can lead us to relapse. So how do we get out of relapse if we're in it? Or if we're sponsoring, how do we help a sponsee get out of relapse? Well, I want to say a few words about how to get out of relapse. The best thing to do is work with a qualified sponsor so she can help you identify your pitfalls and help you find God so that he can bring you out of it, because that's our only solution. It's my opinion, based on my reading of the big book, that a sponsor should not necessarily drop a sponsee if the sponsee eats compulsively, and should not assume it's a first step problem and start over at step one, right? We've just identified 17 possible causes of relapse. Instead, review with her what happened. What pit did she fall into? Where is there a lack of strenuous forward movement in the steps? Is she working hard at self-sacrifice for others? Right? Dr. Bob said the people who relapse are those who stop having a morning quiet time. Has a person stopped that? And on page 35 of the big book, we're told the story of Jim, who, to his consternation, meaning he was baffled, he found himself drunk half a dozen times in rapid succession. Well, what happened? What'd they do? Did they drop him? He said, no. On each of these occasions, we worked with him, reviewing carefully what had happened. There's only a few options, 3 options. 1, a person isn't willing to go to any lengths. Let me say, sometimes, I've heard some people say willingness is overrated. I 100% disagree. Willingness is underrated. Willingness, our book says, is indispensable, meaning can't work the steps without it, right? Page 58 says, if you want what we have, a spiritual experience where God removes our food obsession, who wouldn't, right? And are willing to go to any lengths to get it, then you are ready to take certain steps. And I always say then and only then. If a person isn't willing to go to any lengths, by all means, come to meetings, come to Recovery Jam, go to OA, go anywhere, but don't take a sponsor because it won't work. So it's first option, person isn't willing to go to any lengths. Second option, the person never went through the steps properly. They pick up on their fifth step, but then if you really dig deep, you find they never really took a third step. And then number three, the person let up on something and fell into one of those pits. It has to be one of those three things. Here are two things that don't cause relapse. Number one, circumstances, right? I know I used to be guilty of saying, I binged because ... If you read step one in the AA 12 and 12, it talked about those AAs going off to war and staying sober. I cannot think of anything more stressful than war. And I was pregnant with twins and I had a miscarriage. I lost both the babies and I didn't pick up. But before I was in recovery, it could rain when I wanted it to be sunny and I would pick up. Circumstances are never the cause of relapse. And number two, now just listen to this. Sometimes someone will say it's because they accidentally ate a trigger food. The key word here is accidentally, as in an honest mistake. When I was early on in recovery, I drank diet soda and I drank a can of Diet Sprite, except when I finished, I noticed it wasn't Diet Sprite, it was regular Sprite. Drank the whole can, I had no idea until I finished. It was an honest mistake. Right away, I told either my sponsor or another recovered person who was right there, and that was it. Remember, our solution is being protected by God. What kind of God would withdraw his protection for an honest mistake? Now, yes, it may set off a craving, but if we're honest and we're willing to go to any lengths, we can call someone and say, I accidentally ate this. I didn't realize it. I'm having a craving now. Can you stay on the phone with me for the next few hours until it passes? Right? The key word here is honest mistake. But if we are dishonest with our food and we're eating something we know leads to obsession or compulsion, the issue isn't the food. The issue is just plain old dishonesty. Once the cause of relapse has been identified, then what? On page 20, and this is a good page for everyone to read, it talks about what to do in relapse. And it says we redouble our spiritual activities, which means work twice as hard on whatever step you're on. And then it goes on that page to tell us how to prevent another relapse. It says, if a repetition is to be prevented, place the problem along with everything else, right? Either God is everything or else he's nothing. Place the problem along with everything else in God's hands. We examine all the areas where we're doing the program our own way and begin to do it God's way to the best of our ability. We make sure we're being honest, that we're living up to our ideals, that we're clearing up resentments and fears, that we're making amends quickly when we harm others, that we're spending enough time in prayer and meditation so that we're on the continuous receiving end of God's loving, never-ending power, and that we're helping others to find and fall in love with this great, majestic, wonderful God who supplies us with all the power and protection that we need. So I just want to close by just repeat that one line. If a repetition is to be prevented, place the problem along with everything else in God's hands. And I remember when I read this, like place the problem and everything else in God's hands, like God must have some pretty big hands. And he does. He's big enough to solve all our problems, including our food problem. And so the antidote to relapse and the key to ongoing recovery can really be found on one line on page 59. There is one who has all power. That one is God. May you find him now. And with that, I will pass.